Anne Marie, welcome to the Urban Farming. We're going to start that over. Emma's going to need to take that one out. Okay, let's start over. Anne Marie, welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm so happy to be here.
I am thrilled to have you here. We know each other through social media. Well, we know each other through Dr. B. Will Bulciewicz gut course.
Absolutely.
And now the rest is history. How long ago was that we took that course? Was it in 2020?
Yeah, September 2020.
Okay, so September 2020. It'll be 2 years since we've taken the gut course. In not that many months from now. September is going to come faster than we think. And I am so thankful to have you in my life, my friend.
No, same. It's been interesting to just discover you, connect with you. And I think we have a great friendship that developed. Yeah, that's a great thing about social media, or connecting this way. You make friends around the world.
It's so awesome. And I'm thankful for that Facebook group that we were in, that gut course, that's really where it kind of all started. And now we're doing some mission work, we could call it mission work, with Beauty Counter together to try to shift the industry to a safer place. And I know that's something that's super, dear to you and kind of like your life mission in a sense, or part of your life mission. So why don't you tell us about you, your background, what you do? You're a mom, tell us all about yourself.
No, thank you, Stacy. And maybe I'll just start quickly on the Beauty Counter. So it must have been years ago that, trying to use better, safer products, because I had reactions to other products out there that claimed to be safe or not tested on animals, but my skin would react. Like one time I put a foundation from this company and my whole skin burnt, like from a foundation. So I've been on a journey to go, wait, like I know you don't test on animals, and I'm not encouraging people to test on animals, but don't test on me. And so I've been trying to discover some, different types of products, but nothing was really working. Like I still had very dry skin. I was not always satisfied, and they're not always cheaper either. And when following you and hearing you talk about Beauty Counter, which I had never heard before, I got curious and wanted to try it out. And honestly, Stacy, my skin has not been the same. I don't think I have dry skin anymore. I think those days are gone.
No, I agree with you. And I was just talking with a teammate about this a few days ago. Like, I literally used to have like hands that would crack and dry and bleed. And like my skin would just look so crepey and dry. And I would cry about it. Like I would cry about it. I would be on like pharmaceutical stuff for my skin because it was so dry. And now just with some exfoliation with the little sugar scrub and then like an actual face regimen, I have the best skin, and I'm so thankful. Because I just know a few things, regardless if it's Beauty Counter or not, but like having a good regimen is like all the difference, and making sure we're exfoliating. I think that's like a key factor that so many people miss.
I know, I agree. And also what's been interesting, like I used to do masks, but maybe like once every, I don't know, 3, maybe even 6 months. It wasn't often, but I found just adopting a habit of doing it, especially on the Sunday evening. I don't know, I find it close off that weekend and I'm ready for the rest of the week, but just giving myself like that 10, 15 minutes before the week starts. I also found that routine has made kind of a difference in my life.
Love it. And it's the habits that actually change our life. I love that you brought that up, like a weekly thing. And now we have a new mask coming out today, actually, as we speak. And this is just like gonna be game changing. But anyways, let's talk. Okay, hold on. Let's back up a little bit back to like your aside from Beauty Counter, and like, what do you do for your daily job? Like, what do you do? Because I think that kind of corresponds with like your lifestyle in a sense.
No, absolutely. So on my day job, so maybe I'll just go into a quick career history. So I worked in management consulting for several years, and we worked with a bunch of different industries. And the industry that I found was the most interesting was health and healthcare. But our firm wasn't well known in the health sector, so we would often lose bids to other companies. And I was like, no, you know what? I want to make a difference in the healthcare system. So how do I do that? And I applied to start working in a hospital, and I helped them implement their electronic health record, which was an amazing way to learn how hospitals worked. I worked at the hospital. It was a pediatric hospital for a few years and was an amazing learning experience. And now I work for a national organization that collects healthcare data and information and then produces reports so that decision leaders in our country, so I'm from Canada, can make better decisions to improve the healthcare system. So I am not clinical, but I enjoy kind of being able to make a difference in a very different way. And we know that data and evidence-based decisions actually can make an impact. So I actually work on helping the organization with their governance and strategy work.
Love that. Oh, okay. And that's why you're such a good advocate for everything that you do with when it's clean beauty and when it's also plant-based living, which I know we're going to talk about today. So,
Yes.
Okay. You, Anne-Marie, have transitioned since when? Like, when did you start eating more plant-based? Was it because of the course? I mean, that's like
the weirdest story because I say it took me 20 years to become plant-based, which feels like a long time. I don't think you need that much time to transition. It can definitely be done faster. But it started so I was, oh goodness, always a busybody. In high school, I was involved in everything. I was busy. And I think that came with a lot of stress. And that stress likely led to some gut issues now that I know. And so I had all these digestive issues when I was a teenager. And when I started university, it got worse. So I went to see the doctor. They did a bunch of tests. And eventually my family doctor diagnosed me with irritable bowel syndrome, which is a diagnosis by exclusion. It means that, there's not a test to confirm if you have that, but if the other tests come back negative, then they kind of say, well, you have IBS. And my family doctor told me, and there's not much you can do about it, right? Like just live with it. And to me, I took that answer as more, I can't help you. So you're going to have to figure this out on your own. And back then, this was like a bit more than 20 years ago, started researching, trying to find some information because it's quite painful to either feel bloated and gassy all the time and not knowing what to eat or what will trigger it. And I discovered then that eating animal fat especially was a big trigger. And that would include like butter or cheeses or pieces of meat that are higher in fat. So that was an issue. So I got onto a journey of, okay, well, how do I eliminate meat? I haven't been raised by vegetarian or vegan parents. And so kind of had to adopt a new way of cooking. And then as I was talking to people, they said, oh, but don't go vegan. That's too complicated. You won't have enough protein. You won't have enough iron. So it's like, oh, okay, that sounds just too scary and difficult. So I tried to explore, just different ways of eating vegetarian, but still then you'll have like cheeses or eggs. Those also have higher fat content. And anyways, I became a mom eventually through the process. So my firstborn, my son, he's very intuitive or insightful on some things. And when he was 3, we were coming back from a trip in the car and he stops and he asks, he's like, oh, where does bacon come from? And then I'm like, oh, well, bacon comes from pigs. Stacy, he stopped right then and there and started bawling in the car because he realized that he had eaten bacon in his life. And at 3 made the connection of what that meant for the pig. And that just hit me so hard, like to see that also for him, it was something that mattered. But like we were eating, I would say maybe more of a flexitarian diet in terms we weren't eating a lot of meat, but we were eating it on occasion. So I knew it affected him. And that kind of made me decide, you know what, I need to find a way to eliminate animal foods from my diet. And it feels like it would also align, with what my child wants. And the same thing, we went to visit like an experimental farm and noticed that all the little girl calves had names, but not the little boy calves. And so my son kind of inquired why that was and didn't like the answer either. So it was interesting. So for him talking about animals, although he was just a child, he had this big sense of the world around him. Anyway, so as you see, the journey started with like my health kind of issues. And then when I had a family and my son and talking about animals and animal welfare, that also impacted me a lot. And eventually, so as I'm looking for recipes, Minimalist Baker, her account was taken over by Dr. B. And so I was listening to him and everything he said resonated with me. So that's when immediately he had just launched his book. I bought his book. I read it like I've never read a book so fast. Everything he said just resonated with me intuitively. I wanted to try to adopt it, but I had to go slow because my gut wasn't ready for all that fiber. And then I took his course, and that's where we met. And oh my God, just everything shifted from that point. But I was mostly doing this for myself and talking a bit to my family about it. And by the way, although we talked about the beauty counter products, changing to this way of eating has completely changed my skin as well, like immediately, right? And I think you talked about this on your podcast a lot. Like it's just crazy, the shift.
Oh my gosh. Like if people, I'm probably in my private Facebook group about to do, or maybe I'll do a YouTube. I'm not really quite sure, but like you can glow from within. And it's not just eating all the plants, Anne-Marie. However, that is like one of the best ways to support collagen production and, glowing literally from the inside out, but it's also reducing our processed sugar intake, which I would totally call an environmental toxin. And, it's like, once you start going down this path of better living, whether you start as your gateway of better beauty, or your gateway is eating more clean, or your gateway is more plants in your house, like whatever it might be, like it's a journey and it becomes more of like a holistic approach once you get good at one of them. And I think it just is so good. And all of this decreasing your stress even helps your skin
Absolutely.
look good. Like all of these things that can happen for our body that are positive from living a more holistic life in general. So this is good. Okay. So you read Dr. B's book and you got into that course. I remember when he took over Minimalist Baker's thing. So you literally did this all very fast, because that was kind of like toward the end of his book launch, maybe. I feel like.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Yeah. Because I got his book like months before it even came out. So I felt like it was like already there, but like you did this really fast. So you found him, which everybody needs to go back and listen to Dr. B's episode after we listen to Anne-Marie, because she's got
Absolutely.
amazing tips on parenting and getting your children to eat more plant-based, which we're going to dive into today. That's really why we're here, even though we like to talk about other things. You got to go back and listen to Dr. B's episode. He's coming back on. He's launching another book. We've got a cookbook coming. If you just buy Fiber Fueled, your entire life can change. Okay. Like all the evidence is there. All of the science is there. All of the food, the recipes, the flavors, they're there. And like Anne-Marie said, he breaks it down so that you can heal. Okay. So you've adopted this lifestyle. How are you feeling now? What has happened in this almost 2 years? It's been a year and a half.
Absolutely. So so you'll recall when I started looking into ways to eliminate just meat from my diet, and you hear all these fears from friends about not going vegan or plant-based because it could be dangerous. What I appreciate about Dr. B was he made it so simple. And I was like, oh no, it's not that hard. I just need to eat like more diversity of plants. I'm going to get all the nutrients I need. There's no big magic formula. Like you can do this. It's easy. But go slow, especially if your gut's not used to eating fiber. And for slow initially for me, it meant like get there in 3 days. But I learned that no, give yourself a few weeks to get there when you're introducing new foods. But immediately I notice, and this is where I got hooked, right? So you start shifting, you start eliminating, all the meats, the dairy, the eggs, the processed sugar as well. I had more energy. I was sleeping better and my skin started glowing, and my digestive issues, they were there, but not as strong. Like it was feeling a difference. And also Dr. B, one of my main issues with IBS was constipation. And in his course, he did touch about, ways to manage that. And one of the things, this sounds silly, but one of the hardest new habits I implemented from his course was starting my day with drinking water.
So hard.
And it sounds silly. You're like, well, what's so hard about drinking water? When your body is not used to downing a glass of water in the morning, it does not want to do it.
It doesn't. And like, this is a very sad story with me. Like the only reason why I drink water in the morning, which I think will change in the future is because I have to take a thyroid pill still because my thyroid is messed up. Like, but I do it and I teach my clients, every single one of my clients, to drink water, regardless if it has your fancy lemon in it or not. Like that is to each their
Absolutely.
own. But like, holy moly, if you just flood your body with water, things start to move a little bit better, right? It does make a difference, and it makes a difference for your energy.
Oh, absolutely. All of that. And then your body also starts craving water differently, I find. So you get used in the morning and your body goes, yeah, remember that glass of water? I need it now. So it becomes, initially it's a habit. Like, yeah, you have to force it. But then I find if you listen to your body actually wants that glass of water before anything else.
Yes, I love it. That's so good. I feel like you're a really good adopter of habits. Like this is something that you are so aware of. Most people are not very aware of like the power of adopting habits, whether they're tiny or whether they're big. Like these itty bitty things can make a massive difference, just like literally drinking a glass of water. If that's where you need to start with your plant-based journey, if that's all you take from this episode, like that can be life-changing for you and that can really help. So,
No,
okay.
absolutely. And for me, when
Yeah.
it comes to habit, that's a good observation, Stacey. Like I do find myself, so I'm the type of person, I'm very goal oriented, maybe to a fault sometimes. But when I say, okay, I want to do this, I try to focus not on the action, but on the end goal. And I hear you talk about this too, like know what your why is, right?
Mhm.
So I think when you're committed to, wait, this is my goal, this is what I want to do. Well, what do I need to do to get there? And so if it's eating that, if it's drinking that glass of water in the morning, if it's eliminating the things that aren't making you feel great. So I was focusing on all the great new feelings. And sometimes you would cheat, right? And you would go and you would eat, I don't know, like some chips or something. And then you realize like I would stop and go, wait, how's that making you feel right now? Like, is this satisfying you? And in some cases, like, well, yeah, it satisfies me in my mouth, but my body is kind of like, ugh. So I try to be very aware and mindful and not feel guilty about it. So I think taking judgment out of making the mistakes is also something that makes it easier for you to keep adopting a habit. Like when you're not, I don't know, judging yourself or giving yourself a bad grade or taking all of that out, I find just makes it more of a continuous improvement approach to go, okay, that's fine, but we're going to improve. So if you always have that improved mindset or growth mindset, I think that just makes it easier for habits to stick.
For sure. And I feel like you need to be coaching people on this already. When are you going to start doing that? Okay. So, all right. So you've transitioned to eating more whole foods, whole plant foods. Your son was already very, intuitive and understanding of like life's cycles and like farm to fork concept. Oh my God, I don't want to be eating the animals. So when you transitioned this way, like how did it look? Let's start diving into what did this look like for your family?
Absolutely. So I'll start with, so maybe I knew that I wasn't going to say, okay, I'm just doing it for myself and I'm not going to force anybody in my family to do this. But I said, no, if this is going to work for us as a family, well, then I need to talk about what I'm learning and explain why I've made that decision for me, myself, and then kind of create an invitation to say, hey, do you guys want to try this out? And we already had days where we weren't eating meat in my family. So we weren't eating meat every day. So what we started by doing was just increasing the number of days a week that we wouldn't eat meat. So I think the first phase, if you're eating meat every day, is maybe trying, that meatless Monday or things like that. And then we just expanded that to the point where we were eating meat just once a week, which gives you still that option, I feel, to cook the foods or the meals that your kids really like, right? Because there's still that aspect around taste. I did take a book out from the library to have more conversation with my kids. And I think it was called That's Why We Don't Eat Animals.
Yes, I have that.
It's really well written.
Yeah.
And the way that I used it was to foster a conversation with my children, like, oh, what about this? What about that? And then have them consider it. The way I discovered that book was from a local vegan parent Facebook group. And so I took it out from the library, read it, and then I share, oh, thank you for the recommendation, read it with my kids. They told me they still want to eat a bit of meat and, but they were open to it and the conversation was good. I got surprised by the reaction. One person, well, why can they still eat meat after they've read that book? And it was like, well, it's a process. And I think it's important to assume not just because a kid reads something one time, like they also need to change their their habits or their views, and they need to be ready at their pace. And I find the more you push it, the more you impose their views, it's not going to be a change that sticks for them. Maybe while they're in your house, or they might resent it, but I don't want it just to be like, as long as you're in my household, this is how you're going to eat. But I would also like this to be a choice that they make for them and the rest of their lives, right? Like, I don't want them, once they're out to university or college or out of the house, that they start, that's it, my mom wanted me to eat that way, but I want to make a different decision. So we started having conversations about animal welfare. We also started having discussions about health. And one day my parents took them at McDonald's, because you can't always control what grandparents can do. And, from a grandparent's perspective, for them, it's like, oh, we'll treat them. They enjoy this. They love this. And they came back from McDonald's, and I didn't say anything. I didn't know they were going there, and they come back. And so I asked them, I'm like, well, how do you feel? Do you feel hungry? And remember that they had been starting to eat more vegetable, more diversity of things. And my son goes, I actually still feel quite hungry, and my body doesn't feel like it's eaten anything. And I was like, exactly, right? You don't feel full. You didn't eat nutritious food. So that's, and then he's like, I don't think I want to eat that again. So it's those moments, I think, of awareness and making them realize. And it was, the same thing for my daughter. And she's like, but I really like eating it. It tastes good. And I was like, I get it, but do you feel good? And she's like, well, no, not really.
Yeah.
So I think it's having those conversations with them. And so what made it easy for us to switch as well was with the pandemic. When there's a lot of the lockdowns, where you're not in many social gatherings, and you're able to create that shift or expose them to more of these foods, they get used to that, or you can create a pattern. And here are a few things I discovered as a parent about trying to get the family to adopt this, and with the kids and talking about it, one is having them go at their own pace. I would try some new meals, which they did not appreciate. But what I discovered is, when you do a recipe that they really don't like, wait like 3 or 4 months and do it again. And then they kind of forget a bit that they've eaten it before. They try it again. And I felt by the third time that they said, oh, this is so good. And this happened with like sushi bowls, enchiladas, curries. And at some point I was getting discouraged. I was like, oh, but if they don't like any of the food, like, how are we going to get there as a family? But if you're patient, and in some cases, I always try to make sure that there's one part in the meal that they'll enjoy, right? Like if there's rice, or if there's potatoes. My kids love potatoes, Stacey. You would be,
I have 4 different ones on my shelf right now. I'm like, oh my God, I need to back up and get some more squash. We got to diverse, they're all different types of potatoes, but still, I got a problem.
Absolutely. So if you always make sure there's like one item in the dish that they like, at least they can fill up on that food during the meal, and then they try the others. And I have a rule: you have to try it. You don't have to like it. I'm not going to force you to finish your plate, but you have to try it. Yeah. And so that helped a lot. And I also find that, shifting desserts too. So allowing them initially to have, desserts with a lot of sweets or things like that. It's okay. You can't, if you're too rigid, I find that's where it backfires. And kids are independent beings. Like, I don't think that you own your children. My mom, this is something for my mom. I like the children are there to spend some time with you initially at the beginning, and you want to build that relationship with them. So that's been my big focus. And, when they go to school and they look like nobody in our family is vegan or vegetarian even, or their friends. So it's also been interesting to talk about, well, how do we go into society? And I've been teaching my kids not to be judgmental, not to say if somebody's eating something, to say like, that's not healthy, because it just creates like a reaction that they don't want in their social circles. And I also wanted to protect them from that. Like, they're not ready to have those conversations with others, right? Mm-hmm. But just say, no, it's okay. Like, just you do you, and let them be them. And so that was helpful. And we also developed a little code system. So, which is based on, like a pack of deck, like the suits, the card suits, so hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spade. So we had a system where we categorized foods into these suits. So heart was like anything super healthy for you. You can have unlimited quantities of these, like, so any fruits, any veggies, go ahead. You don't even need to ask. You want an apple? Go in the fridge, get the apple. And diamonds were like, those are, those you can eat, it's fine. But ask maybe in some cases to make sure you don't have too much of those. And then the clubs were like the lucky charm, right? So if I say yes, like if there's some chips at a party and you would like to have some chips, like come and ask. And if I say yes, well, you're lucky, you can get, take a handful of chips or eat something like that. And then I had the spade category, which was like, no, don't even ask. Like if there's a hot dog on the table, you are not getting a hot dog. But we developed this list together, and we developed this list by me sharing why hot dogs were something I never want them to put in their mouth. Like I found once you start reading about it and knowing that it's like, saying category 1 cancer causing food, I was like, I explained this to them and it was like, no, like that's just horrible. And so they agreed to it. But that is a good system. So sometimes they'll come and they'll say, oh, is this like a club? Is this like a diamond? And they're like, oh, this is a heart. This is fine. So it gave us a little code system without kind of judgment that we could kind of talk to each other. And I don't know, I thought that was a fun idea. Made it like into a game with them.
That is amazing. That is such a good idea. Anne-Marie, I feel like this is something that needs to be passed on to, we need to talk about this. This is good.
Well, because here's one of the things is I have friends who work in healthcare. And what I was cautioned on was like, well, don't start going like, well, this is healthy, this is not healthy, because that's how it can lead to eating disorders in some cases, right? When children, if they become obsessive about it. So instead I just created, and then we talk about what's more nutritious or less nutritious. I also find there's some great accounts on Instagram around this, like Kids Eat in Color, I find is a good one to learn how to communicate to kids about food. But I didn't want to go into that's healthy, that's not healthy kind of language because of just, you don't want to categorize food as never healthy, right? I think you just have, except for hot dogs or processed meats. But generally, for the rest, that's my view or my perspective for now. But I think it just helps us have conversations. And then I don't want them to feel guilty. So that club is not about them feeling guilty that they're eating it. It's like, well, enjoy it while you have, but that's something you should just have a little bit of, right?
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know, that creates less fear or less, because it is a process. And maybe, eventually they won't want to eat some of the foods in that category. But I think that banning it completely, I don't know, just makes them want it even more.
Yeah, for some, for sure. Especially for children who have eaten foods like that already.
Absolutely.
Like for Cohen, he doesn't know what he's missing out on, right? Like he doesn't understand or doesn't know yet that hyperstimulation of the processed foods and how deliciously addicting they are and how, quote, lucky the kids are when they get to eat them, etc. So I think that's a good approach, especially for kids who have had that before and they're like, questioning, well, if Sally gets that, why can't I? But what you were saying, Anne-Marie, is like, it kind of started with education. And I think that is top key, even for any wives out there that are wanting to help their husbands transition. Like that is what got Kyle to change.
You can't force it. Absolutely.
And I tried. I mean, I tried and I wasn't like, I didn't wake up in the morning like, I'm going to get Kyle to go plant-based today. But I would make his lunches and stuff like that when he was not working at home, like for his corporate job. And I would send him with there was a point in time where I went raw because that was when I was diagnosed with my thyroid stuff. And I was raw for 2 years. And so I would send him with avocados, carrots, and I don't know, a bag of grapes. And he's like, what is this? What is this? Right. And I'm like, I was actually using that verbiage well, the other choices that you aren't making or that you're making are not healthy, which was super true. I mean, it was true. It was a truth. And he's an adult and he can figure that out if he wants to take that for what it is. But anyways, it wasn't until I went through my certifications and then my licensing with Physicians Committee, where he would come in from work and he would hear me going through my courses. And he would sit down at the island as I'm he eats his dinner. I'm doing my course. He's hearing the science. And it was forever, probably 7 years of me just saying, that's not as healthy for you. Or, what about the animals and the environment? It was really for him, the education, the science.
Absolutely.
And, once he understood also the environmental impact, he heard a lot about that from even Dr. B's like lives on Instagram, just mentioning the environmental impact and stuff like that. But once people can understand why and what it does to their body, longevity wise, what it's doing to the planet, and also of course, like where their food actually comes from. That's where my light switch went off with with the documentary I watched. Like I never actually, like, I knew that beef came from cows, kind of, but like I never really knew that it involved like a cow like dead hanging, like sorry not to like bring us down or be a Debbie Downer, but like I didn't make that connection. So it was not until then that I actually saw the whole thing, the process, that I was like, whoa, I'm not doing that. Like I'm not, and so whatever it might be for a child or for a spouse, like it is the education. I think that's such a powerful thing. And that's literally where you started.
And it's absolutely, education. And there was a few documentaries that I hadn't seen. So I told my husband, I was like, oh, do you want to watch this with me? So, like Game Changers, we watched it together, or Forks Over Knives, or all those documentaries. And so there was that education part. I think there's this realization of, oh, I get that this is a better way of eating. And I do feel better since we've introduced more. But I find that there's also the awareness then about how, when you're adopting it, when you're trying out those habits, how does that make you feel? So with him, I would ask him, how do you feel after that meal? Or how do you feel about that? Because my husband is also the type of person, he can eat anything and never has any digestive issues. Like just so for him, it was like, well, maybe it's just you. Maybe you just need to change because you can't tolerate it. And then I think we got to the point and said, well, maybe I'm just more sensitive, but it doesn't mean it is not causing anything for you. Because you're not feeling it per se. And then also when you start eating, like with the kids, and I think I heard you on one of your other podcasts say, but where you're eating steamed broccoli. And I was like, oh my God, this broccoli is so good today. I'm like, it's like you said, almost sweet. And so I asked my kids, like, what do you think about the broccoli? And they're like, oh, it's delicious. Like, it's nice when they get to, do you feel how sweet it is? Or so that they just get to appreciate food for everything it brings, right? Like not just eating it mindlessly and then realizing that that is also good and not just, the cupcake or the candies, that are giving you that initial spike of like, ooh, this is so good. But also getting it through the other foods, I think kind of that makes a difference.
I love it. Okay. So you were talking about eating in color. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, so I think it was an account on Instagram that I follow, which is Kids Eat in Color. I think it's what it's called. And she shares advice about how to talk to kids about nutrition. And obviously I'm not going to think about some of them now, but it's like, oh, like red vegetables are good for X, or, green vegetables will make your bones strong. Or so she has a way so that it's not this healthy, not healthy. It's like, oh, well, if you eat more of this, you'll get more of that, which kids, I don't know, it seems to resonate with them. So there's a lot of good ideas I found on her post or Instagram to learn how to communicate. And also one of the things I find with kids is they don't just eat with their taste buds, but I think it's true for adults as well, but they also eat with their eyes.
Yes.
So when you give a plate to them, it needs to look fun. It needs to look, and I find if there's a lot of colors, it makes them maybe want to eat it more. Although for my daughter, green is not one of the colors that she still doesn't like. But I tell her, you always need to eat green in every meal, like something green. And the other day there was a lime on the table. She's like, I'm having a lime.
Oh my God.
Same green I'm looking for.
Yes. Oh God, we'll take what we can get.
Exactly.
The greens are a little hard. Yeah. Aside from broccoli is like always a go, but
I do. Yeah. Most kids do enjoy broccoli. Well, anyways, if you expose them to vegetable, broccoli seems to be one of the ones, and spinach as well. And here's how so my daughter, as a baby, I think this is also an interesting story. So we were trying to wean her, and it was making these purees, and my son ate all the purees except the chicken purees, could not, so stop, gave him tofu or other things, but he couldn't eat the meat purees. My daughter, none of the purees, even the cereal ones, she would eat. And so I read about baby-led weaning instead, because this puree thing was not working. And then everything I tried didn't work. And she was like 8 months old and still not eating like solid foods. I was like, this is not going to work. And so one day we had made like macaroni and a meat sauce. Back then we weren't plant-based, and she just at 8 months, ate it with her hands. The whole, not chopped, not pureed, not cut, just ate it. And then the next day we went out somewhere and somebody made these like big Italian sausages on the barbecue, and she'd like grab a sausage at 8 months and was just eating the sausage. And so
Wow.
she's been my carnivore meat eater as a baby, but I was like, this is not going to work for me. You need to eat more veggies. So I started, whenever we would eat meals, I started by just putting like one baby spinach leaf in her plate. And I said, that's, or like if there was potatoes, anything beige she would eat,
Yeah.
but vegetables, she would not. So I said, you just need to eat this one spinach leaf. And then the next week I was like, you're a bit bigger now. By then she was maybe 18 months or 14 months. I was like, you need to eat 2 spinach leaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it became, okay, you need to eat 2 spinach leaf and a cherry tomato.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly, okay, you need to eat like 2 spinach leaves, a cherry tomato, and 2 slices of cucumber. And like now she eats salads, like because she knows she has to, but her body has also come to enjoy. But it was a very slow process. And it was very small quantities, I felt like, and it was slowly ramping up. I think it took me 2 years to
Mm-hmm.
get her
Mm-hmm.
to eat like a, toddler size portion salad. And it was just a lot of patience, but I think just the incremental addition. And then, it was probably not great that she was filling up on like rice or potatoes or bread or things like that, but at least she was eating and slowly introducing the vegetables that way. And it just took some patience. And it was funny, my kids, like my son, he would usually give her the meat in his plate and then she would give him his
Oh, that's
vegetables.
funny. Oh, that's so funny. And by the way, back to the bread and the rice and the potatoes. Ask Dr. McDougall that, he'd be like, that kid's eating right. 90 to 100% of starch on your plate.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, he's amazing. Okay, so give us, Anne-Marie, some top. I like how you did that for your daughter. Small pieces. Let's add on every week, one little thing at a time, and then eventually they adapt. And you also mentioned that it takes about 2 years. Like, it is that repeat exposure. So I just, I think you and I are both on the same page. Like, if you and I could give and have a megaphone, like, and just say something to all of those parents out there, it's like, don't give up. Like, keep being consistent with it. Cause this is what my mom did for me. Like, she kept putting that Popeye spinach on my plate, and she put that Popeye spinach on my plate, and she put it on my plate. And now, like, once I hit my 20s, I would eat the whole can or multiple cans of spinach, which we know is like not optimal because of all of the sodium, etc. But like, still, it's because she continually exposed me to spinach over and over again. So if you're a parent and you want to expose your child to more vegetables and fruits, or just whole plant foods in general, like Anne-Marie said at the beginning of this episode, for her and her digestive system and for her success long-term, you have to go low and slow. You have to, and just like you were saying just now, like 1 spinach leaf, maybe 2 spinach leaves, like do tiny bits. And I think what I hear and see a lot of friends, clients, and parents doing is that they'll like go from, a spaghetti bolognese to like the next night, like a big bowl of beans, and they expect like their child to just eat it. Like it has to be like, no, like a few beans on the bolognese, reduce the bolognese, right? Like, so just little swaps. So you were mentioning some things like that you got frustrated with in terms of maybe like mixed dishes, like tamales or stews or curries that you're making, they just like weren't liking it. And you mentioned that you put one item on their plate that they will like the rice or the potatoes. And then, say you at least need to try the mixture or whatever, the main dish that I made. So what are some of the top dishes that your family now likes?
I think we do everything. And so here's the other tip that I have, the way that to help me with menu planning, right? Like me and my husband, we both work full time. We need a way to make sure that there's like a nice weekly dinner. So I develop a system to help me just plan more easily. Usually on Mondays is some sort of curry or dish like that. And then on the Tuesday, it's usually something like Mexican inspired or Taco Tuesday, right? Then on the Wednesday, it's pasta dish. So any type of pasta. It could be rice pasta, it could be wheat pasta, it could be, I don't know, chickpea pasta. Then on the Thursday, I try to aim for like a bowl, maybe just to have variety. And then on the Friday, like a sandwich, it might be like a burger or things like that. So I find, and I'm not rigid with this system. It's more of a, this helps me to quickly find recipes, because if you're looking at your whole week and you're like, oh, what are we going to eat? It just feels like a lot of decisions. But if you theme your days, I find, well, then your list of recipes or where you're going to eat on a day, part of that decision is already made. And usually on the weekends, I try to make more dishes that maybe take a bit more time, that are more like comfort foods or things that I can spend more time in the kitchen. But most of my weekday recipes would be things I can whip up in 20, 30 minutes, right? Otherwise, it's just not sustainable. So I would say we eat like a variety of things. And there's some really good recipe books out there that we've been using a lot to help us, that are really tasty, whether it's Oshi Glow's Minimalist Baker. We just got Plant U's new recipe book, and it is amazing. I especially like that many of her recipes don't use added oils, and they're delicious. And every single one of them that I made was great so far. So I think it's exploring. And sometimes I do invent recipes and I don't tell my kids, and then they'll say like, "Oh, did you invent this?" Like in a polite way. But we'll get there.
That is so funny. Yeah. Yeah. Cohen also asks, like, is this your recipe? And if I say, if it's my recipe, he's less likely to eat it. But if I'm like, no, that was Chef AJ's recipe, he's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is so good. I'm like, oh, geez, come on. Give me, my recipes are not that bad. That's so good. Okay. So top two things that your whole family likes, Anne-Marie. Top two like dishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me see. I would say I discovered this vegan bolognese sauce, which is made with mushroom and walnuts. And it has such a similar texture to the meat version that I think it gives them that comfort that they used to. Like, honestly, you could not tell. Anyways, I could serve it to people and they would think it is meat, and I'd be fine with that, but it's not. And it's so delicious. So I'd say that is the one bolognese sauce that they really like. And the other one that we really like doing is Minimalist Baker, her pizza burger recipe, which is like a chickpea based patty with like a marinara sauce served with it. And usually we'll have that like on a whole wheat bun, and some, instead of fries, we do like green beans. So that's been, so we steam green beans and they have that same shape, if you will, as a fry. And so they'll eat it with their fingers like they would eat fries with their fingers, right? So I think if you think about what does it look, the colors, some of the tastes, and then, you know, how they eat it with their hands. Yeah, so they enjoy that one too.
Ooh, I love that. I'm going to have to make sure that we get the links for both of those and put them in the show notes. Okay. Anne-Marie, this has been so helpful. I feel like hopefully parents can walk away from this episode feeling empowered with some tips and tricks to help transition their household, their children to a more plant predominant way of eating. I know it's been completely life-changing for you. Absolutely. And I think that it's really important that people follow you because you are inspirational as heck and you make beautiful food. You've been through some culinary work and you love cooking. I've told you multiple times, like you remind me of some of the things that I did like a decade ago. Like, I mean, you geek out on food and like making beautiful food. I used to do that and it like brings me back. I'm like, okay, you make me want to get back into the kitchen anyways. So that's, you're an inspiration to me. And so where can we follow you and where can we stay in touch?
So for me, you can follow me on Instagram. I have an account called Life Amped Up. So it's a play on words on my initial, but also if you know me or even heard the energy, I have a lot of energy. And for me, it's all about living life to the max, right? In terms of benefiting of everything it has to offer. So it's Life Amped, AMPED, up, UP. And I also have a website, lifeampedup.ca. I'm only at the beginning of my journey. So I know on your podcast, you often have entrepreneurs that have been doing this for a few years. For me, I have a message out there that I want to try to share with folks. I think this can have a great impact on the world, and it's where I'm starting.
I love it. You have to start somewhere. Look,
Absolutely.
I mean, hopefully when people listen to this episode, like 5 years from now, I'll have a great YouTube channel, but We got to
It's a
start
lot of
somewhere.
work.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start doing a weekly show. I've told myself I'm going to start doing a weekly show, and I'm not going to stop until I get to where I want to go. I've got
And I think you've done the 1 year mark now.
Oh, on YouTube? I think
Or
I've done it on my podcast.
Yeah.
I know, we need to have a celebratory podcast.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I think you know that more than I do. You're amazing. Okay. So last question, Anne-Marie, before we wrap up, before we go and say goodbye, what does holistic living mean to you?
So for me, holistic living, I think means living everything in balance is what I try to strive. So, the way I eat, the exercise I do, staying connected with friends, the work or the contribution that I do, sleeping. So it is about living in balance. So even, yeah, you heard about the relationship that I try to create with my family as well, or friends, but it's everything in balance for me that just feels right and aligns with who you are and your purpose. I think that's what holistic living means for me.
I like it. I think balance and harmony has a lot to do with holistic living.
Yeah.
So you're spot on. Okay, Anne-Marie, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be voxing back and forth with each other the next few days, because that's what we do.
Absolutely.
All right, friend. Thank you.
So much,
You are
Stacey.
amazing.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye.